there's just such evidence around what it takes, quote unquote, to be happy. And only 10% of, what happens to us in terms of circumstance is really responsible for our happiness, which we think it's way more, but it's not as big of a deal as we think. And that leaves us, we could split the difference in terms of some of the numbers, but like 40% is left to us. And that's accounting for it back to genetics and circumstance. And so that's intentional activity that we get to adjust. I just find that agency intoxicating, in a world where it's like, it's all we have. Why squander it? And I think that this is part of my sort of ethos about this idea about life short. How could we ever get to the end and not do it justice?
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Jodi, I am so excited to be here with you on a Monday, as it case may be. How are you today?
Hey, it's a Monday. I mean, I woke up alive. Life's pretty good, and I'm excited to be here with you.
It is hard to beat that. So speaking of being alive, how would you describe yourself before we start labeling and everything? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah. Well, I would say that I'm a lively speaker and author. That's how I would describe myself today.
Okay. And to the audience, I think you will discover she is much more than that as we jump in. But that's a great place to start. So when you think of living a lively life, like this is a phrase that you use a lot in your phenomenal blog. What does that mean to you? What does living a lively life mean to you? I get it can be different to different people, but for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking for it. And I think like how you even just qualified it by saying, what does it mean to me? Because I sometimes trip up where, I will be talking about, living with aliveness, and I call it astonishingly alive living. Okay. So like, we're really getting descriptive here. And in doing that, it's one part encouraging, but another part, like some people think, well, wait a minute, like what if my kind of quiet life doesn't qualify as astonishing? Because it does sound like it needs to be grandiose. And here's where I just want to say, holy cow, like it's all relative. So the way you asked it of me was cool, because it's like, what does it mean for me, which is different from you, which is different from, the triathlete. So living an astonishingly alive life is when I'm consciously aware that I am giving it a go and that I'm balancing for me what I've really come clear on of what my needs are about how much I need in terms of adventure or social time. Because I'm a bit of an introvert and a homebody. Like I would way rather be at home on the couch, with my husband and cat and a glass of wine and a fuzzy blanket, and Netflix. Like that to me is, quite frankly, like the makings of an amazing Friday night. However, I can't do that too many Friday nights in a row or I start to feel dead inside. And so it's this conscious tapping into like, what is it that makes me feel like I have participated? And yet what also makes me feel like I'm not overrun because all of a sudden I was trying to do too much. So it's like this consistent recalibration.
I love that phrasing because the Netflix and couch example is really powerful to me because I always say to people, look, the easier answer is always going to be sitting on the couch watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And yet, if you get to the end of a year or a life and that's all it was, that's sad, right? Like you really, really missed out. But what that right balance is, what that right equilibrium is going to be different to you personally. What is the right ratio? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've even gotten a little bit prescriptive, like, this is kind of my business. And so I experiment on myself. Usually I don't get harmed in the process, but it's this awareness of like, all right, like I know my doses. So I know maybe it's like an athlete or maybe, I don't know if you're on the bad side, it's like a drug dealer. Like I know how much I need in terms of in a given month, how many moments of like social interactions, like lunches with a friend, like after we're done chatting, I'm going to go meet a friend for a lunch and I'm excited about that. But if I had that also tomorrow and the next day, I would feel overwhelmed. And so for me, I know how much I need in terms of like get outside time or learning time to figure out and like take a course or do something new or creative time to draw or write or whatnot. So it gets a little bit to the point where like I want to get ahead of the curve where I don't know about you, but this is kind of like the way I think we live our lives where we have to like kind of course correct sometimes because we get off path or like, other cool stuff comes up and derails us. But I know there's that weird feeling in life where, for example, I'll feel like something's missing and something's off. And it's that, wait a minute, I haven't maybe been as creative as I've learned I need to be lately. And if I look at my calendar, which is where everything gets scheduled, I have to schedule my aliveness, unfortunately, but it ain't glamorous, but it's true. But then I read, well, duh. Like, when was the last time I actually got the chance to, to make something or to, in my world, it's usually about writing these days.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that I've had like several days go by, I'm like, well, duh, you're missing oxygen that helps you feel alive. So
that hits me on two different levels there. Because one is we have the best laid plans and then go off course. And so my practice is on the Friday before, I don't just look back, I look forward to the next week. And if I have to shift things around because I know the balance, and I also have in my calendar, here's the balance. Here's how much time I want with clients, right? Here's how much time I want with my family. So my calendar is booked, from 5:30 a.m. till I go to bed at 9, and I have my blocks. But there's a separate piece of going off, which I think you were also touching on, that for me, seasonally it changes. And so what may have been right 3 months ago or 6 months ago isn't the right balance for me right now, isn't the right equilibrium, is where I like to use it more. Instead, balance implies equality, whereas equilibrium is saying, hey, the point that's actually right for me may not be 50, maybe 60-40 or 95-5, depending on what the thing is.
Well, can I ask you a question? Because I love this so much that it hurts. Like, you're spending time on the Friday. I know this about you, that you do that, which is a cool life, habit, which we could talk about habits in a sec, because, love-hate relationship with them. But how do you do the macro thing where, like, when you're sitting down doing your next week in my life, that you're making a conscious accommodation for the seasonal shift? How does that happen?
Yeah, so the seasonal shift accommodation is doing a quarterly reset. So, I do the zero-based calendaring, and it wasn't this one and done approach. It's saying, hey, today, this is how I want to live my life. And then I have a separate each quarter, hey, I'm going to take this 4-hour block and really go build it out again. Now, that could happen ahead of time if I go through several weeks. Like, this is just not looking right. And so then instead of just saying I'm failing all the time, saying, has something changed? Do I need to reassess what my priorities are? And maybe now's the time. I did it wrong the first time, or maybe I did it right, but that was only right for a month, and I need to go redo it.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So there's the quarterly deeper dive, broader thought.
Forcing. Yeah. I put that as a forcing, just like the Friday is a forcing mechanism to review the week. The quarterly is a forcing mechanism to say, hey, don't just slide in to what was right 3 years ago is right today.
Yeah. Yeah. I love listening to you because I think what we're talking about is like choosing to live on purpose, right? Like being really thoughtful and deliberate because, like in my language, like we only got so much time, our 4,000 Mondays. So might as well make them count in a way that's thoughtful rather than looking back and going, oh my gosh, I think I might have squandered spring, in a way that like I just kind of sleepwalked through it, right? We've all been there. So for the way you're talking about it too, this planning, it makes me also think, just as a counterbalance to it, because I like a good plan. Otherwise, my life doesn't happen the way that I would love for it to. But then I also have these nigglings as a little bit of like a rule follower. I also have these yearnings for, but I still want spontaneity, and so I feel like this is like a commercial also for, and yet even within the framework, we can do this thing where, like, as busy, successful professionals, I think we can succumb too much to the very schedule that was designed to make us happy, which, like, this is a really good thing. And yet also it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to bust the plan this weekend and just do X, Y, Z,
Yeah. I mean, that whole discipline will set you free, right? And so don't let the discipline become shackles that gets in the way of exactly what you're trying to pursue. So for example, I did a week-long trip with my daughter to New York. No, there was 100% of the time it was just that. It was whatever she wanted to do, we were doing the thing. The calendar goes out because I've deliberately said, hey, no, this huge bucket is going to this.
Yes.
And so but because the other 51 weeks, I was so consistent, I felt totally comfortable doing that. Right? I've lined myself up before and I know I can get back to it after. So this week, this is all yours.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about all the people that I've worked with over time or like in workshops where this does seem to come up a lot. You're making me have this aha in the moment. This is like real time epiphany. I tell you, Andrew, where, many of us have, a life that has been organized in a way that leads to success. And so it's been sort of it has been planned. And so many successful folks along the way have this desire for like, I just want to be told, pack my bags, and then we're just going to go away for the weekend. And I think what you just described is so cool. It's that you kind of earn the right to be carefree and fancy free because it has like, but it's bound. It's like your sandbox is within the confines of a life that you can trust is generally well organized for you. So I like this kind of the I don't know. You can't see me now if you're not like watching, but like I'm moving in a very weird way, like willy nilly.
Fluid. Yeah.
Fluid.
Yeah. I think the insights are going to keep coming. I like the way you think. Just reading the book, I was very excited to connect.
Oh, well, thank you. But yeah, I think if we keep talking, I'm going to have way too many notes. I'm already writing on my sticky notes.
So obviously with You Only Die Once, you know, in your speaking and everything, you're known around mindset. But one thing you talk about in the book, and I hope you're comfortable us diving in here, is earlier in your life having struggled with an eating disorder, which I get is also a mindset thing. But thinking on the nutrition side of things now, right? Like what you know now, how do you think about nourishing and fueling your body? What does that mean to you?
Oh man, and by the way, I like how you just like dive right into the heart of it. It's so it's helpful. I mean, hey, time's of the essence. I have so many thoughts and feelings and opinions on, nutrition as a part of, living this full life. And so, yeah, I had a decade where I was just, I was held sort of captive by myself with initially anorexia. And then it got into, the full blown messy bulimia and then a little bit of back and forth just for the variety platter. And I now see with such clarity through the decade of how, there would be some times where I would think that I've got a handle on this. I'd go to a different sort of therapist, for example. And now I look back on it and I think, oh, young child, you just didn't know. I would think that if I was, for example, bulimic for a phase of, say, 6 months, I would go back to eating, but refraining and restricting. And I would think, yay, I'm better now because I wasn't barfing my brains out. Well, wow, I guess that's one badge of honor, but it's still not going to set you up for a life where you feel alive and you can literally function at your optimal best. So I think one of the main things I've learned, the trick for me, not a trick, the actual steps for success for me getting better in 2019 was a combination of therapy and nutrition. And it was the nutrition that was game changing. And I have been very obsessed with nutrition my whole life, but to the point where it was like favoring, obviously, the less is more approach and the restrictiveness, which only leads to craziness. The only time I think scarcity works is maybe where we'll talk about it in terms of acknowledging that your life is limited, because that's the motivating thing to help you get on with your dreams, because you ain't got all the time in the world. But other than that, scarcity, like limiting, is not good. And I learned to eat again. And it sounds ridiculous that in my 40s, I had to learn to eat again because I was the one that knew everything about nutrition. Yeah, but I was abusing it. That funny feeling where like you can know something, but you are like confirmation biasing the crap out of like the thing you want to know was like no carbs or like just silly, goofy stuff. So it was very helpful. And my husband was amazing where we would like I'd be measuring my rice. I wasn't quite measuring it by the ounce, but I was measuring it by the cup and recognizing like this is fuel for life, not so much fuel. I mean, I could even look at it. I think it's still a nice holistic approach to see it as fuel to allow me to go for my walk in the morning. But that is life. Like that's code for life. But it wasn't fuel for my body to look a certain way. It was all just about back to aliveness. So yeah, that was really the relationship between having to relearn, be open to relearning, because man, I think I was stubborn for a long time. Like, no, I know it all. No, you don't. Or you know it all, but how's that working out for you?
So you had this period where the rules, the science, all these pieces around it, and then how it got in the way of living the life you wanted.
Yeah.
So what does that look like now? Because it's one of those things I'm curious of. You're not going to go eat a pint of Ben and Jerry's every night, I wouldn't imagine. But it's back to that discipline and freedom of like, hey, I know the foods that fuel me and give me energy and make me feel good. And I know it's not a cheat, it's a treat. And there are times to treat myself. Like, how does that all come together now after everything you've been through?
Yeah. The relationship is completely resolved when there are just enough calories. So I believe for me, and I think this is true for many people, maybe not for everybody, but the crazy talk in the head of could I, should I, like, trust me, I can do some damage with a pint of Ben & Jerry's. Have you been around Cherry Garcia? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
the fish food's probably more my speed, but I like cherry.
Really? Okay, I think there's gluten in that one. I can't do that one, damn it. That when there's enough intake, enough to just resolve, like there's got to be a Maslow's hierarchy of needs inside our little nutrition system in our bodies, right? Like when your body learns to say, it's okay, sweetheart. Like I know you're not going to be in nutritional peril come this evening because you won't have had enough literally nutrients to function or to just ravage your own body for some kind of energy, then I feel like it's a lot easier to be able to make a decision and say, tonight's a dessert kind of night. And the deprivation thing, I think, is where the problem comes up. Every time I've deprived myself in pursuit of trying to quote unquote, well, initially it's say maybe to lose weight, to change my shape, or quote unquote to be healthier. It's a bunch of BS for me now. It's like, I just know it's a slippery slope I can't go near. So if I know I'm eating enough to sustain, my mind won't go towards the wild side, but then I will be able to say, some days I have stuff that is quote unquote stuff other people would thumb their nose up at. Like I spent the first 17 years of my career in the health and wellness business. So I worked in health clubs, ran health clubs. And I got to tell you, I mean, it's supposed to be around the healthiest people in the world who are ironically often some of the most warped in terms of their perceptions of what good nutrition is and leading healthy lifestyles, right? So I think I came by that honestly, this sort of judgment of what it meant to have Ben & Jerry's. And once you override that and just say, like back to this nutritionist who helped me get better, she was very clear to me that I could have, get a load of this. Tell me what you think. And a lot of people are going to shudder and cower and just, that's fine. 20% of my daily calories could be in garbage. And then when she told me that, I almost walked out of the room.
As long as you're getting the right nutrients, so you could supplement, whatever it is, it's better to come from whole foods. But as I understand it, depending what your objectives are, 100% could come from garbage. It's just, you're going to get way less to eat and you're going to be so hungry all the time, right? Like, because it's a calories in, calories out thing. So if you're fueling on whole plants, animals, you're just not going to be that hungry. Your body's going to know. It knows those signals because we've lived that life for 250,000 years as humans. If you're fueling on a handful of Oreos, that may fill your stomach like a single apple, but you just had the calories of an entire 1,200 calorie meal. And so your body doesn't know how to process that. It's like, no, I need to eat a lot more. And you're like, calorie wise, I know, but nutrient wise, I do, because I've got no nutrients from what I just consumed. And it's making me so hungry.
Right. Yeah, I think I love what you're saying. And I think even like from a choice in a living and saying, okay, like back to permission, because so much of this is like so rule bound. I'm not allowed to have these certain kinds of foods. And I know a lot of friends who is it like orthorexia, where it's just like a very militant approach to only eating the purest, the cleanest, the so on.
Oh, that's not okay. All right. I didn't even know that had a name. Okay.
Well, it's like a lot of my friends think their daughters don't have eating disorders because, well, they're eating, but they're very healthy. Everything has to be organic, and that's great. But it's when you take that to an extreme, and you can't touch the thing on your plate because it's not exactly part of this like very, very strictly rule bound way of eating that can only adhere to certain standards or qualities. Then I think that might be for some people could be an issue. Anyway.
It's a discipline as shackles versus discipline as freedom again. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, so the 20% number for me was so freeing. It was like, I get to have a Snickers bar, and that actually isn't even 20% of my day. And I remember thinking how ghastly is like, I could have a chocolate bar a day. And I thought, well, I technically could, because if everything else I'm eating is very nourishing, according to the criteria set forth by my fabulous nutritionist, it felt like I get to have this. And that's actually a phrase that I use a lot in life, not just with food. It's about life. Like we get to do these things. We get to make choices. We get to change our job. We get to move to Connecticut if you want to. You get to do, so many things. And that for me felt like it's just very permission based and not admonishment based. And that means that, last night on the couch, I had Swedish fish and I loved every single one of them.
Again, not my speed, but I know some people love Swedish fish. So you don't have any restrictions, right? Like it's just being thoughtful and enjoying and living.
Yeah.
Do you get all the nutrients you want, or are there any supplements you take? Like, hey, I know our soil quality is not great. I top up with some magnesium, or I don't get outside as much as I want.
Yeah. So I need to take B12. I've always had problems with B12 and iron. So I will do B12. I'm now in that funny dance between, I have high cholesterol. Thanks, Mom. Rest in peace. Love you. That came from her side, the high cholesterol problem. So they're getting, red meat, which would normally be my choice where I would have it every 10 days. Now it's finding alternatives there. And I'm actually still in the process of figuring out what that's going to be like.
Okay.
She advised that I try, instead of taking medication for cholesterol, bergamot supplements for a bit. That just wasn't for me. So I will take B12 for sure. For that, I will take, depending on different times, vitamin D, depending on what my blood work will look like. And, then it just depends on, quite frankly, what I have read lately that has been motivating to me. Do I want to do the fish oil capsules? Yeah. You know what? Sure. Or if I watch, Dan Buettner's Blue Zones, then I might make some different choices in terms of supplements. But generally, I'm more about, I stubbornly think I'd rather eat it, but I also know, obviously I'll supplement if I have to. Yeah.
And with cutting back on the red meat, do you supplement with protein at all, or you still just try to get that from your meals?
I'm supplementing with different proteins where I can. Last night was like black bean fest.
Okay, but not a protein powder. You're still doing it.
Oh, not a powder. That's a good point. No, I'm kind of I'm in the protein curious phase of what it would look like to do some supplements.
And no collagen peptides.
Okay. No, my nails and hair want collagen. Let me tell you.
So then why don't you add those in?
You know what? As of this conversation, I'm writing it down on my sticky notes.
Yeah, it was. So my co-founder Lou in Lively, his wife got him to start taking them. And at some point, like a month or two later, he's like, oh my God, my nails are just growing so fast. Like, what's going on? She's like, you dummy, you've been taking collagen for 2 months. That's why. They don't seem to still fully understand the mechanism for it, but it seems to work for hair and nails and some skin. So 2 things, this is supposed to be about your routine, but since you just said you're curious on some of these things, I will throw out there. So for iron, sarsaparilla, I don't know if you've ever looked at it, but it actually helps on iron. So you can just put it in a tea in the morning. Sarsaparilla powder is another way to supplement and get that iron. I started doing it because I don't eat much meat. It's entirely plant-based. And then the other one on cholesterol that I just put 2 other people in today is AMLA, AMLA. It's Chinese gooseberry. It's basically free. It's dirt cheap. And within a month, my ApoB went down 10 points. Somebody else was like, I was doing this for 4 months. My ApoB went from 120 to 61 or something. And there's research behind it. And it's just this ground Chinese gooseberry powder. It's better, but the effects, right? There are no side effects. You're not on a statin. You're not having to do this. It's a natural thing. So it's something I'm very excited about these days.
Ooh, I love that. Hot tip. All right. My sticky note is almost full. Keep going there.
So you talked about, as we were going through the nutrition, I get to. Now, there are a lot of people saying, I wish I could do this with this, right? Like feeling this lack of agency. And what I try to explain to people is, no, you have 100% of the agency in your life. When you're saying, I wish I could do that, but what you're saying is, I am choosing to prioritize this thing over this thing. Yeah. And that can be the right answer, but just own it and you're going to be so much happier. Right? Oh. I wish I could go on vacation, but I can't afford it because I have this car payment. You're like, great. So what you're saying is you prioritize not having your car repossessed more than going on vacation. You're choosing, I get to make this car payment and keep this car, right? Yeah. How did you get to that frame of mind? Because it's seemingly rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your point because I'm thinking about a couple of other examples of that too, with different people, which might be pertinent. With me, I think, it's like when you see life on the other side of something, So I think sometimes not that I advocate for having to get to rock bottom in any circumstance. I mean, like that would be really cool is if we don't all have to get to rock bottom with our choices in life in order to have to kind of rise up again. That sounds awfully painful. But this idea of like, now I see how it is and could be. And now I just realize like it is up to me. I've always had a bit of a visceral reaction to anything veering towards like a victim mindset, or because I fundamentally have a belief that we kind of create what happens around us. And so I've always found it to be encouraging that in the science of positive psychology, which is my background, there's just such evidence around what it takes, quote unquote, to be happy, like to adjust our perception of our life satisfaction. And 50% of it is genetic. So our downer dad or melancholic mom, that might affect our outlook. Similarly, if they're upbeat, then we might be too. And only 10% of, what happens to us in terms of circumstance is really responsible for our happiness, which we think it's way more, right? We think that because we weren't born into the rich family, or because we don't live in this certain glorious area, or because, well, obviously, like if a tornado wipes out your home, it's going to affect you for a while. But it's not as big of a deal as we think. And that leaves us, we could split the difference in terms of some of the numbers, but like 40% is left to us. And that's like accounting for it back to genetics and circumstance. And so that's intentional activity that we get to adjust. I just find that agency intoxicating. I think that it's, in a world where it's like, it's all we have, that why squander it? And I think that this is part of my sort of ethos about this idea about life short. How could we ever get to the end and not do it justice? So that's about taking intentional action. And so I think that for me, fixing, quote unquote, getting help for my eating problems was very much this idea of, I knew I was sort of down in the pits with it for a long time. And that coming out the other side, it was like that for me was a really good crystal clarity of like, right. I didn't reminder, I need to make the choices that are the healthier ones for me, even if they do feel insurmountable.
It's something you cultivated over time. It sounds like it's not this overnight of, hey, I have this. And I try to explain to people when they ask, well, how do you do X? Like you don't go to the gym for one day or 1 week and be like, okay, I've taken care of physical fitness for my life, or I've eaten a salad. And so I'm set, right? It's just cheeseburger and fries the rest. And mindset's the same way, right? Like you've developed it, but what I like you talked about, and you only die once, are some of these daily reminders and ways that you maintain it over time, right? Like you can put the structure around, but then how can you make sure you're sticking to that structure? Can you share some of those, the things that you say, hey, am I on course? Hey, I need this trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, because we will adapt to so much. And we could for just a quick second, like lament how we are built as humans. Because it's really frustrating. You think that, we learned it once that I'm supposed to be in charge of my choices, or, I learned it once that like I should be able to override that negative voice in my head that says, you can't do that. Well, it's a consistent overriding. Because I think whether we can acknowledge that maybe we have a default setting or it's a pattern, or again, we relegate back to this sort of version of a homeostasis that may just not be super duper for us. So the work I do is getting us to remember that we're going to die as a little bit morbid, but mostly super motivating activator to say, okay, and so therefore, because I have 1,812 Mondays left, it's my number as of this week, as of today, that I don't want to delay a goal or a dream or an idea. And so just like what your point is you've made, like we all know that we are living on, like a finite amount of time here. This isn't new to anybody. And we've all said the thing, oh, life's short, and we justify. But yet we continue to go back and take life for granted, right? We continue to go back and live in a version of autopilot. We all do. I do. I do this stuff for a living. Like this is my mission in life. I talk about it every single day, as loud and as far and as wide as I possibly can. And I still need to be reminded to live. And so the way I do it is I do have the countdown every Monday about reminding myself about, this number, in fact, is one less than it was last week. And and maybe I won't even get that many.
Do you have a physical calendar of it? So it's visual, you actually see?
I do in Chicago. And then here where I am in California, because I am calculating it every week, it is something that I don't have to think about visually. But I am a fan. I know that Tim Urban on Wait But Why has a great, 90. He has like the little squares. You can check them off. You can buy a bunch of, there's so many good ones on Etsy. I have a blog post about really cool calendars that remind you of your finitude. But I also have all the visual reminders that are around me. Like, I mean, this is little as like having like a skull ring, all the skulls around me, hourglasses are everywhere, quotes with like framed quotes that are, from either Stoic philosophers or whomever else said something kind of inspiring about the fact that like time's ticking.
Yeah.
It's just got to be a reminder. Now, those are visual things which, let's be honest, can become wallpaper over time. Like you just get used to it. There are some other tips and tricks. Like there's a fun app called We Croak that you can download for $1.99 a month. And it randomly pops up 5 times a day to remind you. It says, remember, you're going to die. That's super amusing.
Yeah.
That was fun. And then talking about it with friends. Usually it's not that appetizing to sit and talk about death. And I'm not talking, by the way, about your will or your last rites or like what you want at your funeral. I mean, you could do that. That's probably productive. I'm just more interested in the discussion about how, okay, I've got this much time left. And then I want to flip the script pretty darn quickly to be like, and so what do you want to do with your time?
Yeah.
Like what, we all have like a notion of a bucket list. They actually say like 73% of Americans have a bucket list, which I'm very wary of because I love the idea of capturing things you want to do. I think that that's great. But I also feel like sometimes it gives us a false sense of security, like with any goal. And I'm sure you've seen some of this research. There's just enough of a bump of satisfaction in ourselves when we, make note of the thing we're going to do.
Especially if we share it with others.
Well, no, that will work to maybe hold us accountable. But I'm more concerned about when you're like, yep, this is a thing, and you fantasize about it, and it gives you enough of a lift that you then take no action. And that is detrimental to all of our lives and health, right? Like, imagining how fit you're going to feel or imagining how good you're going to feel. Well, but you actually have to go to the gym or you actually have to go do it. You have to go to Prague if that's on your list. You can't just write it down and close your journal and walk away.
Yeah, for sure. I hadn't shared this yet. So I went out with a friend of my daughter's yesterday and her kids, and she gave me a bag with a gift. And I didn't open it till this morning, but it was a Taylor Swift friendship bracelet that says Memento Mori. And I was like, there is no perfect timing other than when I'm sitting down with Jodi to share that I just got this. Because bringing to, as someone who wrote a book about stoicism that also quotes Taylor Swift, like there is no more perfect for me constant reminder. And so it was a great launching pad this morning to have the conversation with my daughter. Mm-hmm. So just saying, hey, this means remember death. And you know how we always talk about there's not good, there's not bad. Death isn't good or bad. It is. And then we get to decide the story we then tell about it. Is it this terrible thing that ends, or is it this amazing thing that makes us appreciate the time that we do get and get more out of it? And so it probably heavy for an 8-year-old at 7 a.m, but if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it?
That is the coolest gift ever. I totally want one. And I like how, that's a conversation I think that has to start early and go late. That kind of acceptance is what you're really promoting. It's like a neutral, equanimity of like you said, it just is. And we're all socialized to avoid it, not talk about it. It's distasteful. It's obviously a crappy fact. But once we are able to just do that acknowledgement and take some of the sting out of it, man, that how empowering it can be to be like, and therefore I will move on with it. Like the thought exercise, I know Nietzsche has this exercise, the eternal return. I don't know if you come across it in your studies or your readings. Like he had this mythical character who's like, imagine that you now are destined to live the life you've lived from the minute you were born up until today on repeat for eternity, again and again. So every high, every low, everything. And his point, of course, was that the knowledge of this would either crush you or it would elate you. And for some of us, we might be just a bit indifferent. But generally, it's this idea like, wait a minute, would I want to do this again and again and again? And then the idea of if you did live forever, we'd have zero motivation to get stuff done, right? So we need the end in order to put everything else into this perspective. So you're on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I do a lot of open water swimming in Bermuda and so swim in the ocean. And I was explaining to my daughter at the same time, like, look, every time I get in the water, there's a non-zero chance I don't come back out. And that is true for every single one of us. Every night we go to bed, there's a non-zero chance. Like, it may be very low, but there's a non-zero chance we don't get another day. And so just thinking that last interaction. And I was like, look, with your mom, when you get in a fight, there's a reason I say, hey, you'll really regret. Like, don't go hug her for her, go do it for you, because you're going to want that. And just remembering those last interactions with people, whatever it is, just have it on good terms. Live, because you don't know, right? You have the 1,000+ on the wall. That's not guaranteed.
Right. Yeah. There's a big asterisk next to that number, right?
That's really cool. When and how did you first come across this embracing death as a celebration of life, as an impetus for living?
No one's ever asked me that question when I first came across it. Well, if I go back in time and I think about, I've always been amused by the notions, for example, of like carpe diem, so seizing the day. So I've always been, I've always worked in self-improvement and development, right? Like whether it's working in fitness for all those billions of years or getting into coaching, I've always liked the idea of like, let's max this out. But the twist, like the plot twist about the fact that this is finite, I think all along the way, there was always an amusement again about how absurd it is, the branch of philosophy, like absurdism, like, wait, what? Like we're all working hard, early days of my career, like I'm helping people to try to feel fit, to feel better. And then I'm helping people try to like their lives better. And all this is for what? Like at the end, we're all just going to die. Like it is just bonkers. And we could drive ourselves crazy or to drink or both if we really thought long and hard about it. But then I go, well, that's ironic. I want us to think long and hard about it, about the fact, but again, in the right context, right? So I've always collected the clippings from different philosophers, from different existential psychologists. And I think it was probably two things. My mom died when she was 58. And that was just this, like, we all, again, logically, we know these things can happen and do happen. And so that was just a bit of a right, we don't all get our 4,000 weeks. And then I think more relevant to my motivation was that when she died, my take on it was that she had just so many dreams unfulfilled because she didn't take a lot of action. So she had so creative, all the writings, she was always writing manuscripts and she had these business plans that galore. I mean, she was like a new plan a month, but she didn't do anything about them. And cleaning up her place after she died was such a sad experience to witness. Life it's not even just like not reached its potential, but just the very bitter taste of regrets of like a life unlived. And that for me was something that was very potent and it got me exploring more. And then when I went to grad school for the Master of Applied Positive Psychology at UPenn, I made my thesis on this topic of memento mori. And that was really cool because to be super honest, it gave me the confidence to talk about it as more than just an idea. It was like, oh, this is empirically based. So therefore there's cool, for those of you who care, there's something behind this. But this idea that, we are wired to really respect a deadline. And so it just really comes back to that. Yeah.
Wired to respect a deadline. I like that way of phrasing. So you touched on starting your career in fitness.
Yep.
And I would imagine like with nutrition, all these, it can get to a pathology, but in this living a lively life, what does your fitness routine look like now? Like what does fitness mean to you?
I try to be very accepting and gentle with self-compassion because already I'm coming out of the gates defensive because there is a part of me that still wants this stuff. I can call it, don't worry, I know. But I want to be at a level that I'm not right now, but I'm like, that's cool. I know that I'm in a phase of life now where I am valuing other things more. So I have a really cool routine where I walk before work and after work with my husband, about 30, 40 minutes each. So we get, by the way, that's just that to me is like Yeah, my heart rate goes up. Yeah, we all know the benefits of walking, but it's really just a great time to like center your day, spend time getting caught up. And so it's more like relationship and different perspective time for life. Oh, and I also happen to get some health benefits. That's good. And then there's a little studio near us that we go when we work it in again about twice a week to do some more serious movement that's not walking. So some weights and moving around. And I am working in when I'm brushing my teeth, taking the 2 minutes times 3 times a day to do balancing. So that's kind of how I work in my life. Yeah.
I love that you do that. So I heard that on a podcast.
Yeah.
A lady said she started doing that. She was in her 60s or 70s, and that was one of the things. So she just stands on one leg. And then it got to, if she was holding something in her hand, she would do it. And then, of course, I had to do it and like add little pistol squats in. So 3 times a day, it's 58 on each side.
No way.
Not full pistol squats, right? Like they're little, like
little bits to make your balance go, whoa. Yeah. Wait a sec. 3 times 58 each?
Well, it's 58 on the right, then 58 on the left in the morning, and then after lunch, and then after dinner. So that's 3 times. Yeah.
Wow. That is so remarkable. I love this. Now I feel challenged. Now my crappy little...
Well, no, I love that you do the balancing because like I always feel like I'm such a weirdo with my toothbrush, and I'm like, oh, good. There's somebody else that's doing stuff.
I love a mutual weirdo.
Good. So on the walks, do you have any like favorite walking shoes? So that you're on your feet a lot doing that. What are your?
Yeah, I wear Nikes. They're one of the only ones that fit me. I have really long feet, and and I wear Birkenstock orthotics.
Oh, nice. Okay. And then when you do a lot of speaking, you probably travel with it. Is there anything when you're on the road, do you take anything with you, any kind of to get that movement in where you don't have that same routine?
Yeah, my airport shoes are not quite my scuzzy Nikes, but I make sure I wear for the airport and for traipsing around town wherever I go, more of like the casual running shoe that looks like a little more stylish. And then, for my meetings, I'll wear my more like professional shoes. Yeah. But definitely it's a plan, not just for comfort, but it's like I will get around and walk around in these.
Now, we talked a lot about death, and there's some people have the sleep, I'll sleep when I die mindset. But we also know sleep deprivation like causes insanity, and that it's a necessary part of life. How do you see your sleep and recovery with the travel, with the work, with the everything going on?
Sleep is everything. I am unyielding to the point where I might sacrifice fun. I'm going to sound like a real hypocrite, but I don't care. Because again, I'm like, it's all relative. My version of an alive life is different than yours. I am proud to say I haven't seen the stroke of New Year's on New Year's Eve for years. Because midnight, like who stays up past midnight? We're in bed by like 8:45 now. We're up at 5. So the math works out, but it's that sleep is a very high priority. I will prioritize that over nutrition, clearly eating all the Swedish fish I do happily, etc. Sleep is like, I will book my flights around sleep. Like I will not get into a market if I'm going, even if I'm traveling, like I'm the West Coast now, even if I'm traveling East Coast and I could rationalize that landing at 10 is really only 7 my time. But by the time I get to the airport, nope. Because I want a night where I get to land and I get to set up and I get to have a nice meal, civilized wine. And then I want a nice ease glide into sleep. So sleep is wow, the more I talk about it, I didn't know I love sleep so much. It's just crucial.
I think this is an important point on it's not sleep gets fit in around what the day is. It's you're building your day and life around the sleep that your body needs.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for saying that. And it's so much so that if we're doing something social for a dinner and it's getting to the point where it's getting later, like I make sure I broadcast in the dinner about how we're getting close to our bedtime. Like I have no qualms about social graces. I'm happy to be the first to leave. I will Irish exit the crap out of any outing just to be able to get home and go home and be in bed. Yeah, it's non-negotiable.
Yeah. And so we know from Matthew Walker, right? Like it's quality, quantity, the regularity, the timing. And so you sound really good on regularity, on the timing. Is there anything, and the quantity, right? Like if you always know I'm 8:45 to 5, right? You're getting that solid 8:15. On the quality, Is there anything you do to help with that, or like favorite pajamas, or I wear this eye mask, or use these earplugs, or I have all my bed accoutrements to help my own sleep.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
yeah, it's a whole thing. Yeah, I have a pillowcase I love, and I have a bed warmer that I put on my feet so that I turn it on like 5 minutes before I get in, because like you nice, cool, crisp sheets, but like I do not want cold feet, so it's already ready when I get in, and then I take a CBD pill before I go to bed, which is crucial because we have a cat whom we are deeply devoted to, who wakes me up 5 times a night and needs love and attention. And many people would not put up with it, but I guess other people have kids and they somehow rear those people. And so I because I'm woken up by Andy, I found myself, when you wake up and your mind starts working. The fantastic thing about taking CBD is that I am less prone to all of a sudden doing like the ruminating or the thinking, which is pointless at night. So I just wake up, pet him for 17 seconds, and I fall back asleep effortlessly. And that has been a game changer in my life, the CBD pills.
Do you track your sleep at all? Do you use any trackers? Because I was going to be curious if you slept better on the road than at home without those interruptions. Like what is doing to your deep or your REM or anything?
Good question. Yeah, Andy is a definite sleep killer, the cat. But I will also say when I'm on the road, I get a preponderance of foot cramps and leg cramps. So I'm always up hopping around my hotel room anyways. So it's a trade-off. I don't know.
So again, this is your show, but one recommendation I'm going to throw out there that I put my dad on. LMNT. Have you tried this stuff?
I've heard of it. Is Tim Ferriss into that?
Tim Ferriss, a lot of people are. And my dad was a cardiologist. I put him on it. He stopped having the night cramps. He sleeps much better. Yeah. So it's all it is: magnesium, potassium, sodium in this ratio. There's some really tasty flavors. So it's 100% the last 24 months, my most gifted product, because I travel with stacks of them. So I'm giving them to flight attendants. I'm giving to anybody I'm sitting next to. I'm always handing this stuff out like it's candy.
No way. I want that candy. LMNT, done. Of all the things you've recommended, I just put that one at the top of the list.
Okay. Yeah. It's these little sachets. Now they have, that's not as good for traveling, but in my house, I have cans. They have these canned carbonated ones that are just delicious. They're so good. I like the black cherry and the grapefruit. Really, really good. But then they have the sachets for traveling. Yeah, it's 100% natural. And
there's no xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol.
No added coloring or anything like that. So it's the salts and then like natural raspberry flavor or natural cacao for the chocolate. So there's a chocolate one, so you can do kind of like a salty, chocolatey, hot chocolate in the winter.
Oh, that's everything. I love salt. Yeah. I love chocolate. I want it now.
Salt's so good, right? Yeah.
God, thank you. You just made my life better already.
Yeah, so you'll enjoy it, plus get rid of those cramps and sleep better when you travel. So one of the things you touched on a few times, right? One of the benefits of the walking is less that it's even for the physical fitness. It's for that connection with your husband. Mm-hmm. You talked about you prefer to just sit with him on the couch and watch Netflix, but after a while you'd miss, I really miss that time with my friends, that social side. And this is the pillar of health, this social connection and purpose. You touch on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that people think it ends in self-actualization, but there's actually this sixth one of like, what do we then put into the world and how do we engage with it? And it sounds like you're deliberate and thoughtful about what that right engagement looks like for you. And so can you say what it looks like for you and then how you discovered that?
Usually the discovery is through discovering what doesn't work first. At least that has been my treacherous road. And luckily it's not even treacherous. Usually it's like, I kind of feel like when, I know I'm on the road a lot for work and my husband travels for work too. So we know that when we are home, it's like morning and night, don't debate it. We're doing our walk. And then when we are home, like for example, I know that next week as an example, we've got multiple things. And it was like that if we're both home Wednesday, we're not touching it. Like that's us. And so that's back to prioritizing. It's like how you really nicely summarized how sleep is not amorphous around life. It's like, this is the priority. It's like, we are the priority. We want to spend this time together. And so, no, we're not going to say yes to that social thing. It's us because we know that's sacred. So it's very much about blocking that first. That's always the priority for me, would be the time with him. And then the social stuff kind of moves in around that. And it's dosed in a way that I'm a little bit mechanical about it, which sounds funny, like I am a bit robotic. But again, back to being more of an introvert. For me, it's prescriptive. It's like, this is going to sound very terrible, and all my friends are going to be like, you are horrible, because I love spending time with them. But when I'm thinking about spending time, my first instinct is I just want to be home and alone or whatever with my husband. So my instinct is going to be say no to the invitation. But every time I go, life's better. So I have to override my tendency, which is, no, I can't make it, to make up a story why I can't go. And it's to say, like, I need to mechanically and like override and be a robot and say, I will prescribe. I will say yes to 4 of these things a month. You know, like making sure that I am like getting it in kind of like a checkbox.
That dosing is important, right? The 4 times a month, because there's another side to that exact same story where the right dosing for you is 4 times a month. You commit to 10, and then because you're a people pleaser, and then you feel bad about backing out. And so then it's all this obligation. Your life's not better when you do it. You feel more out of charge, more out of sync with your life. And so dialing in that dosing sounds really important.
Yeah. Thank you for observing and being very astute that I am a pleaser. Like my instinct, and I will overthink and feel bad when I am not available. But actually, I think I'm getting better at that one. And you know what has helped me with that is all this talk and research I do around back to the Grim Reaper. But it's this idea about people who've had the brushes with death. So someone that maybe has had a like life-altering diagnosis like cancer, and then they're in remission and they kind of go, oh, now I see the light. One of the things, the characteristics of these really wise people is that they have a better clarity about what matters and what doesn't matter. And one of the things that they've kind of come out of this, I don't know, the woods, and they go, I now know, like, I'm going to prioritize the people I want in my life and deprioritize the people that are just sort of extraneous. And that's an example to me of like, if I don't have time for you because I just can't, I won't fit into my lovely life. And I don't mean lovely like selfishly, but like the life that I've designed that will make me better for me and my husband and my cat and for you, my friend, then it's one of those things. If I get grief from somebody about it, then I don't feel bad, because it's like, hey, like this is what I have to offer. You know, like I'm thinking of a friend where it's like, I can probably, by the time the rotation happens, I will probably only see them quarterly. And they are very social, and they would love something probably every 10 days. And that's just not ever going to happen in my life. And so it's one of those, like, I'm kind of unapologetic about like, hey, I hope you can be okay with quarterly, because that's what fits in, and let's have a great time every quarter. But if not, a little bit of a friendly FU.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that different than intimate relationship, right? You need to be on the same page. And so if her demands are too high and that's what she needs from a friend, then at some point she has to also realize, hey, that's not the friend that I need and want. And if her demands to make it work don't fit yours, like, that's not a friend I need and want. But you know what? There are 8 billion people in the world. Like there are lots that we'll find our tribe and dial it in.
Well said. Yep. You can augment elsewhere or move on. But yeah, I'm better and better, because I think about it as, while I haven't had a near-death experience to learn this personally, I'm very good at learning vicariously, you know, and that's what I talk about as like, I always do this. I know it sounds very morbid, but imagine I came home from the hospital and I got to like a new lease on life. Woohoo, second chance. Yeah, I'm not going to fuss too much about whether, you know, we're going out or whether I'm saying yes to that demand or whether I'm joining that committee. I'm going to be like, is this what I really want? Is this the way I can contribute best? Is this going to light me up? Is this going to be, again, am I living like I mean it, or am I living like you want me to live it?
Having spoken to you, having read You Only Die Once, I mean, you've gotten to a place where I think you truly are a role model and inspiration for living like you want it, like living like you mean it. And I appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
So we're getting near the end, not hopefully of our Mondays, but of this episode on this Monday. But before we jump on, what would you say are your 5 must-haves for a lively life for you?
You know, I think I'll come back to the first one, which would be the idea of counting how many Mondays we have left. It's only when we do that granular, annoying but important math that we really start and get that sense that, you know what, this is a ticking time bomb of a life and I better get on with it. So number one, the math. Number two, I think it's important to really get in tune with what makes you happy, like what makes you feel alive. So many of us are looking after other people or work, or we've lost the plot on our own internal sense and source of happiness. And when we write out all the things that do make us happy and we actually find a way to make those little things happen, having your coffee outside in the morning or watching the sunset or spending time with the dog or whatever that is, making sure we're orchestrating our lives that way, it's just a simple thing. I think a third thing is having something to look forward to. So having something in the calendar, I'm a fan of having something every week and then month ahead and then within the year that you can actively look forward to. And it could be, again, something really silly and fun, like having a giant paella cookout or whatever that might be for you. So having something is I think that's like the low-hanging fruit of positive psychology. And we talked about it earlier, but I think sleep is just so crucial. We tend to underestimate the impact that it has in our lives, but holy cow, we will sleep when we're dead, but also let's sleep so that, we don't become zombies while we are alive. And then I would also circle back around to the, connection with other people. It's like, even if some of us are loners, it is required for the good life, that it allows us to have a laugh, have a connection, help someone, give. These are all things that we all know from research. It's just, they enhance the quality of our own lives.
And I'm guessing it's where you started with that first one. But if you had one place for people to start, say, here's one action to just get going with this, what would that be?
Yeah, it is like, no matter what, get in touch with your mortality. Everything to me starts with that, because we need the unfortunate little bit of a poke in the ribs, I believe, in order to actually start to take this seriously or less seriously, depending on what you need.
Yeah. All right. We've touched a lot on health, like living a lively life. What is one guilty, or it sounds like you've finally gotten to a headspace where it's not guilty, it's guilt-free, but kind of pleasure that may not fit in with that box of health.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a toss-up right now, but maybe they go together because, again, I've alluded to couch time. And I know how it's something that comes up for you. And I talk a lot about this idea about living a squander-free life. And a lot of people think that we know what squandering is. That's when we kind of have that empty feeling when you're like, oh my gosh, I completely wasted this weekend and I feel bad about it, versus like, I indulged in rest and relaxation and I completely, did that incredible, binge on Netflix and it felt so cool to watch that and revel and have fun time. There's a difference in the mindset. And I think, on one hand, I will go into an evening of watching TV and having my, Sour Patch Kids quite deliciously and happily, because for me, that feels like I killed this day. Like I had a great day for the following reasons, and I get to recline and have this great time. And yet, I can't do that 7 days in a row as discussed, but I think that that's probably, it's seemingly incompatible with my live an astonishingly alive life. But I'm like, back to the idea of being in moderation.
Yeah. Having that quiet peace, comfort.
Yeah.
Jodi, this has been so insightful for me. I really, really appreciate the time. Before we sign off, is there anyone else you think we should be speaking with on the show to profile as health and wellness, health span, lively role models?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can definitely think of a few people who I think would be really great fitness leaders in their own realm. There's one person I can think of in particular, Olivia Ellis, who's getting her PhD in positive psychology, and she's a fitness guru who I think is phenomenal. She teaches about how there's this thing that happens, the relationship with love and physical fitness, this idea about how in being with other people in, like, let's just say like group exercise settings is like an expression of love. She's just doing such cool research. I think she'd be so good for you to talk to.
And so before we sign off, and we'll certainly put links to You Only Die Once, your site, all the amazing work you do in the show notes, but anything else before we say goodbye?
Oh, you know what? I would just encourage us to continue to not be afraid of the Reaper. I mean, really, we need like a healthy dose of fear, but like be willing to engage in a drink with the Reaper, because he's got so much perspective to offer. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you. Great time chatting with you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.